real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today, we are going to be talking about developing leaders and being authentic. For that, I have Tim Ulmer here from On Step. A little background on Tim. He was in the U.S. Navy for 8.5 years as a naval flight officer and flight instructor, and is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy with a degree in political science and an executive leadership coaching certificate from Georgetown University. He also spent 20 years in the FBI as a special agent, 15 of which were spent at the hostage rescue team. Tim then transferred to the FBI's training division, where he led the strategic design, development, and delivery of all leadership developmental experiences and training across all levels of the FBI's 1,500 plus leaders. Now he conducts leadership programs for various groups in law enforcement and the United States Special Operations Command, as well as coaching chiefs of surgery. So we'll get into that. Chiefs of surgery from the Baylor College of Medicine. So I think truly showing that skills translate across industries and organizations. Well studied and well traveled. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So we had mutual contact to put us in touch. I'm thankful that we're able to connect and discuss this. It's definitely a topic that I think needs a lot more exposure. And yeah, with your background, I'm happy to get you in here and we can talk about it. So maybe we'll start, just talk a little bit about yourself. We don't have to go through your whole history, but how you got into the leadership space. So I guess if a lot of people look at it, they say all the things or see the things you did. What made you land on leadership of all things? So if you could kind of take us to that point.
I think initially probably just going to the Naval Academy, right? And I think, our mutual friend you had on before talked about it too, like from the day you walk into that place. And I was just talking about this to somebody else the other day about kind of the difference between corporate and even really anywhere else other than the military. Day one, you walk in and you hear about leadership and how you're a leader in whatever capacity or wherever you're at. And then for the rest of your career, regardless whether you're enlisted or officer, leadership is always at the forefront of like what's going on. How are you doing? Whether it's formal education, informal education, how are you leading the troops that you have or what? Like it's always present. Where I think in other, organizations outside the military, it's one of those things that come up. Oh, we have a developmental program, or we have a class you're going to go to, or hey, we're going to do a book study. But then it's like, okay, we did that. Now we're done with that. Like back to business, back to whatever. And it's never the forefront. So I think really going to the Naval Academy first is kind of where that was just entrenched. Like every day you're surrounded by everything. Like everywhere you look, there's something about leadership or some, thread that's weaved into whatever you're doing that has a leadership context to it. And then, as I played sports, same thing, played sports my whole life, of being on teams and just seeing formal and informal leadership, whether it's from coaches or players. So it's always been a thing that's been surrounded and kind of integral to whatever profession I was in. I really didn't take a super interest into it until I got into like where I was studying it. Once I was on the hostage rescue team, and I got to be basically a unit chief, so a unit commander there, one of the units. And I started working with our commander. And one of the things that I was realizing in that specialized unit, as well as like our sister units who were in the military, and I think they realized it earlier than we did. But then at the same time, I started realizing and started talking to him. And then we kind of came to this like conclusion, like, oh yeah, we've been dealing with this already. Was these units and these specialized programs that have really extensive selection programs to get into. It's, in the U.S. military, it's Army SF, Naval Spec War, AFSOC, Special Operations. Any of those have these really long, really intense selections. that go through. HRT is the same, but we select a lot of people for these traits that we look for. And usually leadership in some form is that, how do we adapt? How do we think? All those things are what goes into that. But I think what was happening, at least I know from our experience, at least from my perspective on it, was we selected all these people. And then once they're in the unit, we don't really talk about leadership anymore because it's almost like this foregone conclusion.
Mm.
Like we selected you, you're at the top of the, 1% or whatever you want to call it. So I don't have to spend time on that, as well as everything else we have to do. There's so much to do, so much to train, so much to think about that. Hey, if I got to leave something out, I'm going to leave leadership out because, hey, these guys are all proven leaders, and they do well anyway. And then the people that are younger are just going to learn essentially by osmosis by watching the leaders ahead of them.
Mhm.
But I think some of the units that I talk to in our military are seeing the same thing. Like we still got to talk about leadership, and maybe even more so because of the groups you're leading. Right? You're all in this high-powered, high-performance, uber smart kind of people, really thinking outside the box in a lot of ways. And how do you lead a group of people like that? So that's kind of where I really started being like, hey, I really want to kind of dig into this,
Yeah.
like development leaders and how do we look at it. So, maybe a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I got to that point of, hey, I really want to go down this rabbit hole of, hey, what does leadership development mean, and what do we really need to do? And at least in our context, at the hostage rescue team when I started.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I think that was a really good answer. The part at the end though about leading, so you're essentially leading leaders. How do you do that? Because that's not even an aspect that's even come up in any of my other conversations. Kind of making me think like, so maybe people are starting to have some humility or can take that step back and go, this is the person leading the scenario or the situation. We're gonna take from them. Um, you don't really have to like. I think people might think it's all alpha males in there, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna do this and like kind of screw you or whatever." But if you're truly leaders, yeah, maybe some people have a step back and can go, "This is the person for this scenario. We're gonna follow them." Do you find that in there?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think I would call, that's what, a lot of, at least a lot of the core of the US military and other, I think other ones, that mission command or decentralized command, um, providing enough information, enough commander's intent to the people that work for you to where they can operate on their own, kind of autonomously, but within the constraints of what you told them. Like, hey, where am I going? What's the actual end state that we want to try to, meet, whether it's with an initiative or hey, this mission, whatever it might be. This is what I want. This is where we want to go. Here's some constraints you may have. And then the rest is, hey, as long as you're in these constraints, I want you to be able to operate because the people who are on the forefront usually have the best information.
Yeah.
And that it's a hard point now, I think. And, I saw it real time, and I think you could read, a million case studies on it. The advent of technology has been awesome, but when you look at it for leadership, now everyone can be in everyone's business, right? I was reading, if you've read the book Team of Teams, General McChrystal talks about that, where he would sit, in his command center and he could literally watch live operations going on all throughout his theater. And he literally could push buttons and talk right to the guys on the ground,
Yeah.
which, which in a lot of ways gives him really good situational awareness. But as he stated, like he couldn't step in and do that. Like that would have just caused so much problem.
Yeah.
The level of that micromanagement where, hey, I can just call up that team leader and be like, hey, why are you doing this? Like, I don't see it this way. You're not doing the right thing. Because he's still with all that technology, you still don't have the context of like what's right in front of you, what's happening, on the ground. You still have that, bird's eye view looking through the ISR platform and just listen to comms. You still don't have that synthesis of it all together right in front of you.
Yeah.
So, with that, I think it's super important to have that kind of leadership to where, hey, you're on the ground, you're in charge essentially. I've given you my intent. If there's something you need help with, whatever, then I can weigh in. But otherwise, we'll talk about it afterwards in the AAR. And I think you see that even down to, your small units. We used to be, doing CQB, close cutters combat or whatever, like going through, a house and clearing it. as you move through, like that next first guy is like he's in charge, right? Like he goes in the room and he decides and he goes where he goes, and then the next guy follows him. And then if you need a breacher, like that breacher now becomes like he evaluates what he needs to do and he gives feedback or he just does it. Like it's not the commander saying, okay, put this kind of charge or put this kind of do this kind of breach or whatever. He leaves it up to the expert. And at that moment, that guy who's the expert is kind of in charge.
Yeah. I think you're speaking. You could take exactly what you said and put it in a policing scenario. It's we're getting body cameras up here now. That's becoming a big thing. And I remember when they're training us on this, they're like, yeah, they're looking at possibly making it so that the commander, whoever's running the scenario or the event you're involved in, they can talk directly to you. It's like, I don't want someone talking out of my chest when I'm trying to talk to other people and there's chaos going around. And then they have the helicopter, and the helicopter has video on it. And that's the thing that they use right now. So they
Yeah.
have a downlink and they can watch as things move. And you do see that, you do hear that from people running events where it's like, I need you to move 6 steps to the left. It's like, I can't move there because I can see I'm going to get killed if I go there. Like, just get out of my business. So,
Yeah.
but it's hard. It's hard for people to give up that control. I think some people really get afraid of doing that. Maybe that's why you see the issues.
No, I think that's 100%. That's why I think it's counterintuitive to a lot. I mean, I think in the military, especially in the units, that we've seen it, that everyone hears about that are so successful is because they've adopted that, right? Like that's just the way they do business. Because you can't be that good, you can't be that fluid, and you can't deal in those dynamic and complex situations without it. If you only deal with top down, you always got to keep going back up the chain to ask, what can I do? What can I do? And how do I do it? You're going to slow everything down. And at least in all the environments that I was exposed to, whether it was in training or in real life, like you just can't slow down. Like you can't afford to wait.
Yeah.
Those decisions are happening so fast that you can't keep up when you're looking through a soda straw. Like to your point, that camera that's on your chest is a soda straw that doesn't see the whole breadth of what's going on and the whole context, the noises, the smells, the other things that are going on, the people that are in the distance that you can hear, but the people on the camera can't. I mean, what's the lighting look like? I mean, all those things that you take in almost instantaneously, the cameras and the other things can't possibly, feed into your brain. And that's just one more distraction if someone's talking to you saying, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
It's one more thing you don't need.
I wanted to go back a little bit because we went super deep real quick there. Really good topics though. I just want to find out, is there, as you're kind of coming up through all these different positions and the ranks stuff, is there somebody that had a huge influence on you? You mentioned like reading some books, so obviously that's a good source. But any books, people, anyone have a particular influence on you and kind of the direction you went?
I don't know if there's any specific person. I think it's like a lot of people say they watched and looked around, and by no means was I great at leading. Like I had all my share of faults, if not more. And I'm sure all the guys that worked for me would tell you that. But I was always looking to people that number one weren't afraid to kind of push the envelope, which I think in that environment is 99% of the people that are in that environment. That high performance, special operations kind of place. Like everyone's looking for, hey, how do I do this better? How do I do this faster? Those kinds of things. So I would look around to see, hey, who's evolving? And it wouldn't always be inside like, my specific sphere, but like who's evolving in other things that are tangential to us, the military or even business or things like that. Like I started getting interested in, complexity, and I'm kind of, probably in my high school. If you're looking at like where my understanding is probably high school starting into college level of understanding of complexity and things and like how do we deal with it. But looking and thinking like that, like who thinks differently about situations, because that's another facet, I think, like we talked about leading leaders, is as you move up, you have to change how you think. You have to change, understand that your perspective needs to change too. Going back to this fluid or decentralized leadership. A buddy of mine put it to me this way: like, hey, if I'm the troop commander or I'm the platoon commander or whatever it might be, and my guys are digging a ditch and we're setting up camp, and then we got a mission coming up, or whatever. But then hey, we always hear people, I want to lead by example. I don't want to ask my guys to do anything that I wouldn't do. So I run over there and grab a shovel and start digging in the hole.
Mm.
Right? What does that mean? That means now my focus is totally on digging this hole, and it's not out thinking about, hey, what's coming next? Are we
Yeah.
setting up, what's the operational picture? What's the strategic picture that I need to be aware of? Make sure my guys, my people understand what's coming. So then I can give them good intent when they go out on a mission or when they have to do some other task that we're giving them. I'm giving them how I understand it the best and making sure they do so they can do their job
Mm.
fully. So it's not me trying to do their jobs for them. Um, uh, it's kind of, how do I make the environment better for them to do their jobs? And I
Yeah.
think as you move up, people lose that perspective. And I have this conversation all the time, and I saw it in the FBI, I think in everything. But typically, when you're in a leadership position, the first one, maybe the second one, but your frontline leader, you spend the most time in that one, right? Like, so in the FBI, you may spend 7, 8 years as a frontline supervisor in a lot of places. But then as you move up, the next level, you may only spend 2 to 3 years. And then the next level after that, you may spend a year and a half. And
Yeah.
then the next level after that, you may only spend a year and sometimes less than a year. So you can go from frontline supervisor to 4 levels up in like 5 or 6 years. On the same time you spent in one leadership job, you've had four.
Hmm.
So what do people usually revert back to when things get uncomfortable? They go back to where they were comfortable. They go back to, hey, what worked for me when I was doing well as a leader? Oh, well, when I was a frontline leader, that's what I did. I went in and I was, really involved in my squad's business. But as a director or somebody who's 3 levels up, you can't be getting down in the weeds like that because you're losing all the perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as you get higher up, you have different battles to kind of take on, right? Whether you're answering, like everybody's got a different boss. So, yeah, you're answering to the city for budgets or different government. Um, One thing I always ask on here of the last few guests, especially with the leadership topic, is do you think leaders are born? Can they be made? What's your view on this? Like, does everybody have it in them? Because I don't think everybody has it in them. I think there are some characteristics or some traits that you do have to have intrinsically. It's just some people are naturally better at it than others. But what would your take be on that?
You know, I definitely think you can have both, right?
Mm.
But I don't think either one or the other probably gives you everything you need one way or the other, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Being like, hey, we've all been around those people that from a young age, like they just were kind of naturally those people like, hey, I want to follow him or her, and I want to do like when they say something, I do it. Whether it's and when you're younger, it's probably, hey, they're the cool ones, so I'm going to follow them, right? Or they're always sticking up for people, so I want to kind of hang out with them, or whatever it might be. And then as you get older and you see different people do things, like they just kind of had that natural charisma, which I think is really probably the biggest thing that I would say people are kind of born with.
Okay.
Um, but I think learning, I mean, like I just said, the military spends 20 plus years or 30 in a 30-year career of, say, a general or an admiral in the military. They'll spend 3, 4, 5 years doing nothing but education. And a lot of it's focused on leadership, in different contexts. As they move up, they get different education to say, okay, hey, just like we said, you're moving into this role now. Here's some knowledge and stuff we want to teach you about, whether it's, logistics or, macroeconomics or something, because you're going to move into the Pentagon. But here's also different perspectives on leadership at that level. Like, how do you best lead? Um, so I think learning is probably overwhelmingly what I think people have to do, even if you're technically born leader,
Yep.
because you're not going to be able to move up. You can only do so much, right? I think, and be really good at it. Can you get by? Yeah, there's always people that can get by, um, and lead things, but are they as good as they could be? I would say no. Not without doing that self reflection, learning, constantly trying to expand your knowledge base, constantly being curious and trying to learn new things, and looking at different aspects of the world and how do I pull that into my context to see if it works or doesn't work, and how do I apply it. Um, and I think what we, again, I'm by no means an expert, but like what we're learning about the brain and how when you do new things, your brain changes, it evolves.
Yeah.
Neuroplasticity, it builds different pathways for you to learn things. So, the old like, hey, you're just the way you are and you're always going to be that way. From my perspective, I just don't think that's true anymore. Like I think, people are learning. So when you say, hey, I don't think people are cut out for leadership, yeah, do I think anyone can be a leader? Yeah, I do. I think it's more of a choice.
Okay.
Being a leader is definitely right. Like people choose to put themselves in those positions in whatever context it is, right? Like you can look, there's a group of people and something happens on the street, someone gets hurt, something happens. Somebody chooses to be like, okay, I'm going to take charge. No one else is. Or I just naturally do this, or, I'm a leader in other things, so I'm going to jump up and do it. But they make a conscious choice to do that. And then other people look around and be like, all right, this person seems to know what they're doing. I'm going to follow them, right?
Yeah.
Or you have another person that jumps in and says, hey, I'm a doctor. You know, I know what I'm doing, but hey, you take care of this situation. And then you start working together and figuring out, hey, who's better suited to lead in the situation. Um, so I think it's a choice, number one, and I think you probably have this in all your um, organizations too, your units. Well, who wants to raise their hand to go up into management or leaders, right?
Yeah.
And typically you get the cross-eyed view a lot of times, like, well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to lead? Why do you want to join, the bad people that are the leaders? Like, it's always this negative connotation sometimes, but it's definitely a choice. And then it's a choice in how you choose to be a leader. You can rely just on what you know. And hey, does that get me by? Yeah, but is that usually the best? Or you can make the choice to how do I continue to look to get better and learn and add things to my toolkit or take things away.
Yeah. I think those are all very valid points. And it's not, I guess maybe I can rephrase what I was saying. It was not to say that not everybody doesn't, what is it? That not, I guess everybody would have the potential to show leadership in a certain scenario. But I think when you take in the whole constellation of characteristics that a person has, yeah, like certainly there's a group of people that'll be like, they'll just say no to every scenario. And it's like, I'm just comfortable going about my day and I don't want to be in those roles. And it's just your character kind of lends to that, I guess. So, I really like the education piece too. Like you constantly have to be learning and adapting. I think that's one thing where, yeah, people might come in with good intentions. So those early identifiers of, hey, I want to be in management because I can lead and I have good intentions, but then when you start getting comfortable and not educating and not speaking with your people and stuff, that's where I think a lot of people get real kind of jaded at them. And, it kind of changes. And that's where you get that side eye. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Right. So, um, one of the things I wanted to ask about was the leadership development side. So, this is something that I haven't seen necessarily. Like, there's no leadership development unit. There's education units, like especially in policing, we have like a whole continuing ed section. But I was wondering, like, do you see this in any organizations where it's specifically is it like a headhunters within the organization go, we need that person to be in this unit for whatever reason it might be? Like, does anything like that exist?
So let me understand what you're saying. So when you're talking about like a leadership development where you have like a unit or some part of the organization just focuses on, hey, how do we develop our leaders inside?
Yeah.
As opposed to talent management, which I would, um, from my perspective, would be like, how do I pick the right people for the right jobs?
Well, and you're talking about like you have that one off, like, hey, we have a course and we do the course and we're like, hey, we're all leaders now. And then you just never hear about something again. But it's like truly, you're constantly on it. You're trying to get people better and thinking outside the box. And then further to that, I guess you could identify like this person or these people over here, they're really good. We need them in these units or in this section of management. So have you ever seen anything like that, I guess?
Yeah, I think at least, I mean, I think the military, at least the US military does that. I mean, are they perfect at it? No. But again, I always catch some grief about it, from certain groups when we're talking, when we always keep bringing up, the military and leadership. And I know there's companies out there, I know there's some entities out there that do really good jobs outside the military with leadership development and really make it an important part, a cornerstone of what they do. But by and large, I don't see any organizations that really do it better than that, right? Like that puts such an emphasis on it. Like I said, from literally the day you walk in, whatever pipeline, whatever job, whatever service you're in, like it's always first and foremost, like
Hmm.
in a lot of people's mind. And then for the rest of your career, you are constantly either being asked to do education on it or day to day. It's like we said, if you're the brand new, enlisted guy that's, an E3 and you're in charge of the broom closet, you're in charge of the broom closet. Like, so you're in charge of that. And you might have the E1 that just showed up and now he works for you to take care of the broom closet in the hallway to make sure it's clean or whatever that job is. You have some leadership responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And go back to it. Where other jobs, in other organizations, I don't think they do that. In the FBI, we have a whole unit that is the leadership, development unit. And we spend a lot of time looking at that and saying, hey, how do we develop our, people when they first come in? Along with the training academy, we kind of work with them. Then how do we take our frontline leaders and then our senior leaders and then our executive leaders? But those usually are, hey, when you're going to go into that job or you just got that job, we send you to a course for a few weeks and then that's it.
Yeah.
And then you're up for the next job. Okay, maybe we can send you to that and you get that for a week or two and then that's it. There's not this constant talk of leadership in like, in the military, a lot of times I think you'd see in different units, like people would come, like different commanders might come and be like, hey, how are you handling this challenge? Like, what leadership, let's talk about like how I can get better. Don't know that you see that a lot, other than somebody searching it out. It's not readily out there and trying to inform people constantly on it in most organizations.
Maybe I'll ask, like in the FBI though, do they have so in policing, I guess how I would equate it to this is we have like our performance reviews like every 6 months. And then they just, what are your goals? And did you accomplish your last goals? And I get they're giving you like a template, like something that exists to kind of help the bosses get you along. But it literally is just like a 5 minute exercise. And 99% of people just see it as like it's a thing I have to do and then it's gone. Like does the FBI have that type of performance measurements? But on top of that, they're doing also other courses.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's where I'll put in like the two, like so the talent management and how we select leaders is pretty much separate from how we develop them, right? Now
Okay.
sometimes it coincides to where, hey, you got to take this course before you can be, eligible for this job, or take this test and pass this test before you take this job. And that's theoretically maybe some sort of leadership, gateway. Like if you can pass this test, then that means you're ready to lead.
Hmm.
But number one, I hate that. I think it's an efficient way to do it, especially when you have a lot. But are you getting the best people? No, because now you're just getting the people that maybe I take tests well. Maybe I know what the test is.
Yeah.
And the test they give in the FBI, and it was funny because the frontline test they used to take, which they're changing it, but like I failed it the first time, and most guys from military or had past leadership experience usually failed it
Oh,
the
really?
first time they. It was on you took it on a phone, like you had this long phone call and scenarios kept happening to you. Like you're sitting at your desk, people would call you up and say, hey, I got this problem, solve it. And then you have to talk to them. And it was how you interacted and what you said on the phone. And of course, everyone's got their, hey, we want you to think this way. We want you to say these. And if you didn't, then they're like, well, you don't meet all the requirements for what we want in a leader.
Mm.
And most guys would be like, come away and be like, okay, well, now I know how the game's played. Now I can go back and I can play the game the right way and say the thing that I know I need to say. And then I'll get the check in the box and
Yeah.
go. And then the other thing they did, much like what you're saying, yeah, there's performance reviews, but it was really predicated on you writing a whole, like almost resume where you would write, okay, here's we'd have certain traits, leadership competencies, they called them, and you would write experiences you had in your career or really your life, because you could use sometimes you could even use ones outside the FBI that corresponded to those competencies. And it really came down to how good a story could you write
Yeah.
to make people say, "Oh, yeah, he really exhibits this, this, and this." And then they would rank you and they'd be like, "Okay, yeah, you scored the best, so you get the job."
Mhm.
Um, so it became this whole how much can I talk about myself real well? Which, we covered right in the beginning. It's like a lot of people don't like doing that, right? Like they feel bad, especially in environments where we say, "Hey, we want you to be servant leaders. We want you to be humble. We want you to put others first. We don't want you to be the center of attention." But then your selection process forces you to do that. So
Yep.
then if it selection process does, then are you doing things while you're a leader, trying to make sure you have things to write to brag about when you go to it? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And does it create this vicious cycle? I know in the military, we used to always see, like, we call them fit reps or performance reviews, but every, so often they would have to change them because everyone would start becoming nuanced because, hey, I'd write this great, fit rep for somebody. And then over the years, they'd be like, okay, well, all the fit reps look the same because everyone's great. And then it'd be like, "Okay, well, use these words." Okay, use, if he's really good, say impressed. If he's not, just say, okay, looked good. And then well, if impressed was written, then okay, this guy's really good as opposed to somebody who's not, but they sent the story's the same. And then it'd be like, well, bold these words and underline them. That means that this person's even better than the other person because I didn't bold and underline. I mean, it got to that point of where they're like, okay, this is crazy. Let's throw it out, start over again. And then over time, we'll just keep getting inflated. And they'd be like, okay, throw it out again and do it.
That's where it's funny because this is exactly what happens in policing. And when you apply to a job, there's an application process, and you got to write out a memo, a 1490, and they went from like a few pages, and then it's like now it's 10 pages. Now they're 20 pages. Like, just tell me your whole life in great detail. And then it's funny
Yeah.
because then the bosses go like, I don't, if 20 people, like if you're in a job where 2 people apply, maybe that's fine. But some units you get like 20, 30 people, and they're like, I don't want to read any of this. So it's like,
Exactly.
but you did it to yourself. So
Exactly. And then you just skim through and find, like, oh, here's 5 things that I like. And then it's more, and then you create this culture of like, okay, well, I know 4 people that he worked for, so I'm gonna call him up. Hey, what do you think of this guy or this woman? What do you think about them? Are they good or they aren't good? No, they're awesome. You should hire them. And then, okay, well, now that's in the back of my mind. So then it's like, okay, I'm gonna hire that guy.
yeah.
Like, it's gotta be, more holistic. The US Army has done this. And I know there's people that don't like it and some that do, but it's kind of this blind battalion commander's assessment, I think they call it. I don't know exactly, but they went to the thing of like, hey, they looked at a lot of things. They bring you out for like a whole like 3 or 4 days, and you almost go through like a whole assessment.
Oh
And
wow.
then you go before the board with the assessment, but it's supposed to be all blind. All right. So you're just a number. Anything that dictates whether, anything about you that's identifiable other than like what you've done, they kind of get rid of. They even went to the point, if they still do it, but like when they would interview, they'd put you behind the screen,
Oh yeah.
like with the door kind of thing. So they can't see you, they can't tell who you are or what you are. I think they even maybe they played with disguising their voices and stuff. So the board
Jeez.
would ask you questions, but they couldn't tell, you're a woman, you're a man, who you are. Like if they knew who you like, there was no way they could tell. They could only look at what they had and listen to what you said. And they're still doing forms of that, and it's expanding because I think in the end, if you assess kind of the whole person, you're going to get better leaders. Is there a perfect way to do leadership assessment? I think, when you can watch someone work for an extended period of time and see them go through different scenarios and see how they react. Yes, I think that's probably the best way to do it. Is that the most practical for big organizations that have turnover constantly? Can you run assessment programs to where you actually need people to go through scenarios or that you can evaluate them in real time? I don't think you can, but I think that's also one reason why you see in these small units that are so, highly performing, they do end up with really good leaders for the most part because you have that time to watch people kind of come up through the ranks and see them in all these different scenarios and understand like that whole person. So when you decide, hey, that person's going to be a leader for this group, you have a really good idea of how they're going to be.
I think one of the things that they were looking at doing, at least here with our service, and I don't know if they do it anywhere else, but was peer reviews and talking to the people that you work with, right? And they're going to give you, that's where I think you could get a pretty honest gauge, especially if it's a little more open and free flowing. Not like you're saying, like if you come in with like such a hard script, people learn how to play the game. The stuff with the screens and changing voices, that's funny. It's gonna get so wild that they're just gonna go back to the days where it's like in the movies, it's like, oh, you did an awesome mission, good job, here's your next rank. Like I kept saying
Yeah.
that about in policing. I'm like, I just did our promotion process and it's like almost a year long. Like it's a lot of stuff. And I just kept saying, I'm like, I did this really awesome job where couldn't someone just come and be like, you're a sergeant now. Okay, like here's your new badge. Like I wish it was like
Yeah.
in the movies. So
Yeah.
one
For
thing
sure.
I wanted to make sure we talk about was authentic leadership. So the topic here, I want to kind of get a sense of what it means to you, and then maybe we'll go from there. So, what does it mean to you, and what does it look like? So, if you could kind of explain it.
Yeah. I mean, it's another one of these, models, if you will, that people have come up with um, and talked about, authentic leadership. What does it mean? There's dating all the way back to like, the great man theory was like the first one, like, I'm going to be John Wayne and that's who we need as leaders. That's where I think a lot of you're either born a leader or you're not,
Hmm.
and then it's gone through, hey, you're, transformational leadership and all of these different things, and I think that becomes, from my perspective, that's a very academic look at leadership. Like that's somebody saying, hey, let's dissect all these different things and what's the process? What's the, all the intricate things that you need to have? And authentic leadership is similar, but I think we're starting to see, and now you're even seeing too, like you always hear now, servant leadership, right?
Yep.
Like, what does that mean? And I think those two are super closely related. Um, so I probably would jump back and forth between, like when I'm looking at them, I kind of think about that as a whole. But I think, the authentic part is it's really somebody who's very self-aware of who they are, um, and is willing to take those leaps and learn, be curious about things that are happening around them, and not afraid to be vulnerable, not afraid to be, admit when they make mistakes or admit that they don't know stuff, right? Like we don't want the leaders that are like think they know everything and aren't willing to listen to people and just say, hey, this is what we're doing, regardless of what you think. Like we just talked about those environments. Like if I have a leader that's sitting outside the house telling you, no, just do this. I don't care what you're seeing or what you're thinking, like that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Um, you've got to have that flexibility. Um, and the awareness to understand like, hey, where can I be valuable in situations like that? And when I aren't. And then, am I willing to admit mistakes? Am I willing to learn new things? And change? Even understand like, hey, this isn't working. Like I thought this was a good way to be, but apparently this group that I'm in charge of now or whatever doesn't seem to react to it, or even down to the people, right? Hey, I've got 3 people over here that really react to me coming down on them hard and giving them a lot of challenges where this group doesn't. How do I have to be with them? Understanding and being able to do that, but then do it from a place that doesn't seem like, um, you're kind of just making it up. Like when you're a person, like you're the same person at work as you are at home.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
You know?
Consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, consistency in yeah, you're the same person you are at home as at work. When people know what they can expect from you, it allows them to operate. Like they learn how to operate around you and with you. Because if you're different every day or different with every single scenario, people either take a hands off and they go like, I don't know what's going to happen here, or they get scared to do anything. But the consistency, I think if you're doing good in home life, it translates to doing good at work life, and then further on to leadership. Now I can give more than I'm getting, but if I'm consistent across those, then it, I don't have to act right, and it's a lot of work to put on a different act every time you go in a different room or a different environment. but also people start to see through that. Like people aren't stupid; they can tell if you're acting or you're not. And even one of the things I was thinking about too, just with the authentic part. Um, I want to say it's like, do you think that's something that people learn to do as well, or is that more of kind of your characteristics as a person? Maybe your experiences, things kind of lend to that, but is that something that you can teach, or is that in any sort of leadership courses? Because I would like to learn how to like get people to learn that.
Well, I mean, so some of the things I do, and one of the guys that's really kind of been a mentor to me, is a guy named Tony Burgess, who's
Mm,
helped me, especially um, after I've gotten that. But while I was in the FBI too, he's a guy we brought in to do some leadership development, and has actually become a good friend. And now I actually, work with him, and he's very good at this. And yes, I think all of that stuff is learnable, right? Like I think everyone has it in them. Again, it's a choice.
mhm.
It's like, it's funny to me when we say people like, hey, you just, my authentic self is, I don't like to talk to people. And I guess this is the danger of the authentic leadership, especially the more and more I look at it, is that hey, it lends itself to potentially like, hey, well, my authentic self is like, I want to be an ass,
Mhm.
right? I just don't like people. Okay, well, then maybe that's, I don't know, I want you to be that way
Yeah.
as a leader, right? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm being my authentic self, but does that really lend itself to being a good leader? Um, no. And I think these things are, again, it goes back to being choice. Like, hey, do you know, like caring for your people is a hard job, right? And it's hard to come into a group of people you don't know and say, okay, now I'm going to put all your needs before mine, right? Before I even know you, right? As opposed to like, hey, even sometimes like, hey, I got to put you ahead of my family, right? Because I'm going to stay here longer, or I've got to commit to doing this, or you're having a problem, so I'm going to spend extra time. I'm going to come to your house and help you, fix something because I know you're having a hard time, or whatever it is. Those are choices you have to make, and they may not be habits, that things that you normally would have done. But hey, now I'm a leader, so I got to learn to do that if I really want to be effective. But it's just like building any other habit, right?
I think that also speaks to that earlier consistency part. Like, and if I'm good at home, then I'm able to take that extra time and give it to other people, right? The spouse is going to understand, hey, yeah, that's cool. Like I'll deal with the kids or whatever's going on, and you can go help that person that needs the help. So it's all interconnected.
Oh yeah, 100%. You know, but like back to the choice, like I think that's where it's like we know, at least we would say as of right now, you would look and say, okay, people who are servant leaders that put the team, put the mission, put all these things first are more about giving to the people, not worried about credit, not worrying, are usually some of our most effective leaders, right? So how do you get that way if you haven't normally done that or you weren't brought up that way? Like you can learn it, but it takes work,
Hmm.
like anything. Like you can literally do anything you want to do if you're willing to put the work in, right? But we don't think about changing who we are as much as we think about like I want to get in shape or I want to lose weight or I want to go to take this course so I can get the next job. We don't think about like, well, hey, how do I spend more time with people? How do I show them I care more? How do I, get better at doing this thing to help out my team or help out, the organization? Some people do, but we typically don't put as much effort into those as we do other things.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like the leadership part is, again, it comes back to choice. If I choose to do it and it's important enough to me, yeah, can I learn to do anything? Does that mean I'm going to be great at it? No, but if I really choose to do it and I practice it and I get better and better and better at it, then it becomes automatic. Then I become very comfortable doing it. Then yeah, I'm probably pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But that's going to take a while to do. Just like if I come on to a attack team the first time and I've only shot a gun once, I'm probably not going to be as good as a lot of the other people that are trying out or that get on the team. But if I commit myself to say, hey, I'm going to go to the range every day and I'm going to practice these things and I'm going to I'll probably get worse before I get better. Eventually, I'm going to get better is why I put in the time. And then eventually I'm going to get really good.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be this norm where I don't have to think about it anymore.
I want to talk a little bit about how this translates from, because most of our experiences are military and police, so kind of similar realms, but to other industries, other organizations. You work with the chiefs of surgery for Baylor College, so doing some coaching there. Are there any other industries that you've worked with or organizations? And what have you seen, just like how the skills kind of translate across? Is it the same? Is there a little tweaking, or is it, what does that look like?
No, I mean they're the only one right now that I do a lot of work with, like outside of either law enforcement or the military. But I would tell you, medicine is very closely related to any other high stress environment. So
Hmm.
whether policing, military, or whatever, like I mean, I think their suicide rate, as far as that, is higher than any first responders, if I remember right. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's if it's not higher, it's definitely right up there. Um, with things they see, with the stress that's put on them, with the amount of work they have to do, all those things, that couple with how that stresses people out and you get burnout and all these other things. So they're right in the thick of it. So a lot of the things that we talk about um, apply to them for sure. The thing I would say about 99% at least of the medical world that I've seen, and it's not vast, but it's over a few different areas and a few different hospitals and specialties and everything else, is that number one, like we talked about, they don't think about leadership hardly at all. Like, it's not even on the radar for 99% of them. And if it is, it's like, "Hey, we did a 3-day class on, hey, if you're gonna be, a leader here, then, hey, you should do these kinds of things." Okay, now back to what we really do,
Yeah.
becoming a surgeon or whatever, right? Because that's what we place the value on, which I'm not saying that's wrong per se, but at some point, those people turn into leaders, whether it's leaders in the operating room or like the chiefs of surgery, they become in charge of departments and, whole, maybe whole hospital wings or, research things or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden they find themselves again totally out of their comfort zone or something they've done and in their case, because of the length of time, especially for surgeons, how long it takes them to become even established and get all their qualifications and stuff to where like, hey, I'm like an attending or I'm a chief. That could be like 15, 20 years
Yeah.
of teaching, and then all of a sudden they get put in charge of like this vast group. It's now very diverse, all these different functions, and they're like, "Okay, go lead it."
Yeah.
And they know how to lead in the operating room, kind of like how that frontline supervisor or squad leader knows how to lead his 4 or 5 people in that dynamic environment. They're usually probably pretty good at it. But then all of a sudden, I just jump like 3 levels essentially, and my perspective has to change by that, and I can't do it.
Hmm.
Um, So from that perspective, they're almost identical, right? And I think they're even in a harder spot than a lot of like, law enforcement or other hierarchical pseudo military kind of organizations that all have leadership things into them. Like most police agencies would talk about leadership at some level, right? And say, hey, we know it's important. Do they spend as much time as they should on it? Probably not. But like other places don't spend hardly any time. And I think medicine is one of them just because they look at all the competing things that have to go on for you to become like, a great doctor or surgeon. And leadership is far in the rear view for a lot of them until they get to a point of where oh crap, now I got to be in charge of a lot of stuff.
Do you find, is there a lot of resistance, like, or how have they been in this realm? Lots of people come up and ask questions after you do a presentation for them and kind of go like, I never thought about this.
No, I think there's just like I think most places, and I used to always be skeptical about this because when I was young too, I was like, someone's going to come in and teach us leadership. Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? But I think if it's done well, and when I say done well, like when it's really organic to the group that you're talking to, and they're actually learning and contributing as much as more than the person who's teaching it, is where I think, where people learn the most. But I think they're yearning for that. I think most people are. I think especially younger generations are yearning to learn, like, how do I become a better leader? How do I do well in these situations? How do I do these things? Um, and learn the skills that I need to be a good leader, as opposed to, hey, just learning the skills that I need to do like this specific part of this job or whatever it might be. So by and large, at least my experience with medical professionals in general, they love it. Like they can't get enough in a lot of ways. Like they really want to learn and they're playing catch up.
Yeah.
A lot of times they feel more overwhelmed. Like, okay, I don't know any of this stuff. Like, how do I get better at doing this?
That's very cool. You know, I think for my experience being in policing, I feel like we always things are mostly born out of like some huge event or huge crisis. So we could look at everything from COVID to BLM and George Floyd for us, and that really, I think over these last few years, create a lot of I'll say managers where we are very risk averse, and everybody was like, "Whoa, I don't want to make decisions. I don't want to take risk. Shut it all down. Micromanage." Like, so we got a whole bunch of that, but now it's kind of opening up again, and we're seeing people are like, "Hey, I want to be in these leadership roles," and so now you get people in to talk about these things. So it kind of, I guess, maybe goes in waves a bit for us. I'm sure the military could have similar experiences. I mean, you go to a war, you're not in war, or something happens while you're there, and everybody's like, "Hey, we need to really reassess what we're doing, like where we are right now." Because I guess it can go in waves. It's interesting just about like when you go out into the other sectors that are out there. I mean, I don't know anything about surgery. I don't know what their world would be like. Um, but I think it's pretty cool when you get to go out there and like even just talking about the leadership aspect and learning about, oh, what is this whole group of people? What do they do over there? And what are their issues and what's it like for them? Um, yeah, it's like you can branch out. I guess you in any other lifetime you'd be like, I'd have no business talking to these people, but you find that common ground with the leadership aspect. So yeah, really, really neat stuff that you get to do out there. Um, we're just kind of coming up to the end of our time. I just want to make sure we talk about any kind of current projects or news or anything you got going on. You want to talk about your organization. Just what work do you have coming down the pipeline?
Well, my organization is me, so I'm an organization of one.
Yeah.
I'm doing, for some law enforcement agencies, doing some, again, leadership stuff. Um, Mainly the courses that I do are for frontline leaders and then also what we call senior leaders. So that's the people that are moving up, into that either middle/senior management kind of place and talking about the things that, we've just talked about, like how do you change your perspective? Looking at complexity. That's kind of my next. I'm dabbling in it, but now I'm actually going to run a course in a few weeks that I'm actually putting a lot of the complexity stuff into it. Um, which goes to like what you were just talking about, like organizations, people, everything. Like, hey, we get in our comfort zones. We like that, what I call, and I think a lot of people do, the illusion of control. Like, okay, things are going well. Like I've got all these constraints and like I know what I'm doing. Like nothing's going to happen. Everything's going great. I'm not going to change anything. Why would I? Even though things around us are changing,
Hmm.
no, I feel really good. I feel really good until boom, enough change happens that it forces us to go, oh, uh-oh,
Yeah.
like now what I do doesn't work, or what I was doing caused this, or didn't have a good, response for what happened. And then all of a sudden we go back and everyone does the AARs and says, okay, well, how did we miss this? How did we fail? And I think, again, the best organizations, you know, that I've seen, again, mostly are military, the the special operations, the smaller units, but the ones that are constantly looking at themselves, regardless, and they still have them. We have them. Those moments, those black swans, if you would, that happen. That people are like, "Well, I didn't see that coming." But then when they start looking back, they're like, "Oh, well, maybe we should have seen it coming. Why didn't we see it was coming?" And they start to evolve. And the good ones are starting to look ahead and see, what don't we see coming?
Hmm.
How are we preparing for that? How are we actually learning to operate in complexity and in those things to where we can start almost seeing these things happen? Or if we don't see them, if we can't see them, we've prepared ourselves to deal with those things when they pop.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that community does so well. Hey, we got a plan.
It's like a resilience to change. Like you're malleable the whole time.
Yeah, the ability to be able to adapt to what's going on, right? Like understand it. I know like, hey, what's going to get thrown at me and I'm just going to roll with it, right? And I'm going to make decisions based on what I'm seeing, not what I thought I was going to see, and
Yeah.
then how do I keep going? How do I keep, not letting it, paralyze me, because and usually you do this through training, right? Like, we always talk about, in CQB in the military, shoot, move, and communicate. In aviation, it was aviate, navigate, communicate. When
Hmm.
everything else, you had that little mantra and everything you trained, and hey, that gets you out of like probably 99% of bad things, right? At least to a point of where you get a chance to go take a breath and be like, okay, what do we really need to do? But it's like, how do I break contact, or how do I keep the airplane flying and do this? And then now, okay, everything's kind of stabilized for a minute. Take a breath and be like, okay, what do we really have? What's going on? What do we need to do? How do we adjust? And then come up with a better plan, right? Like most people don't do that. Most people don't have that um, training and thought process. So when crazy things happen to them, they usually, they do the fight or freeze, and usually have no good way to figure it out
Hmm.
until like they get away from it and then go, oh, what happened? But constantly thinking about those things ahead of time, I think, and saying the what if game. Like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it may not be the exact thing that you what if, but the mere exercise of going through, hey, it's not going to go the way we think. So we're already preparing for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
You're much more able to absorb it, understand it, and make some decisions based on what's happening as opposed to what you thought.
Awesome. That's great advice. And I think that brings us right to the end of our time. I want to give you the option or the option, the opportunity to just let people know where they can find you and your work. So where's the best place to get a hold of you?
I mean, probably LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I can send you my link for LinkedIn. But right now, yeah, I'm working on a website. But again, I'm a organization of one trying to do that, so I haven't gotten to that yet. Um, but yeah, if anyone wants to talk or anything, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Is probably the best place as of right now.
Awesome. I'll get that up in the episode description when I put it out there. And I'll just remind people as well to share and like, and also on the quiet professional side. Uh, yeah, thank you, Tim, for being on the show today. I love the conversation. I'll have to get you back in again because there's a million things. As you can see, I'm writing notes here. Other people can't see because I don't do video yet. But I'm
Yeah,
writing notes as we're going. I was like, oh man, there's so many good ideas here. So yeah, thank you for being on the show and stick around for 2 seconds.
yeah. No, I really appreciate it, and look forward to coming back.